Homeless at 17, I talk with James Reams of James Reams and the Barnstormers about his life from being a homeless teen to being extremely successful in his musical career. Listen on to see why I had to ask. I'm with Mr. James Reams. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks, Lori. I'm excited about being on your show.
Can you tell my listeners your story about your young years as a child with your dad's band and moving around from Kentucky?
Yes. When I was raised in Kentucky, my father was very interested in old-time music, and we had a family band, and we would play square dances, community events for local people, and in those square dances, I fondly remember kerosene lamps and sawdust on the floor, and also I had a feeling for what it was like to create community with music. So it was really an amazing experience for me. Music has sort of been something that's always been in my life, and I never really labeled it. I never labeled it bluegrass or old time or Americana until later on, whenever I realized people started putting labels on these things. I always thought of it as music, Lillian.
That sounds like fun. What importance did you have in the band? What did you play or do?
Well, I was sort of like a gopher, and also my important part was listening. And also I played guitar. What I did is I developed a rhythm guitar style and method that's based on people like Riley Puckett, and then, of course, it advanced through the years to people like Doc Watson and Tony Rice. But I think I used a combination of a lot of different rhythm players to create my sound and be sort of the backbone of a band along with the bass rhythm section.
Can you tell my listeners about how you moved from Kentucky when you were really little?
Yes. My father had met my mother. It was sort of a romantic notion. He was traveling as a Navy recruiter on a diesel train going through the Rockies. And my mother was from a completely different state. She was from Wisconsin. She was traveling through the Rockies on the same train. It became snowbound. And when it became snowbound, they were trapped on this train for 4 days. And they met. And they would talk and socialize with other people on the train. And soon, after they were released or were able to get off the snowbound train and back to their separate homes, my father contacted my mother. They had 3 dates. I know this sounds a little rash. They had 3 dates and decided that they were going to get married. Then she moved down to Kentucky, and that's where I was raised and in a two-room schoolhouse, and it was actually the first time, Lillian, that I became aware of an organization that I like to talk about even today, one called Toys for Tots, because I was a young boy going to a small barber, and I was waiting in the chair, and there was a box in the corner with a number of toys, and it was around Christmas time, and I said to my father, I said, Dad, what are those toys for? I thought they were for me to play with. And he said, no. He says, we're collecting those toys for an organization called Toys for Tots to give to homeless children during Christmas time so that they have something to play with. Because, one of the basic elementary things of growing up is having toys and feeling part of a community. And so that became a big interest of mine also, helping those who need things in their life. Lillian, and I'm very lucky. And you probably realize where I'm leading to this, because later on in life, after I had played music for a number of years and went to New York City and played in clubs and places at the Bottom Line and Lincoln Center and played all over, just a little before that, I had a wild streak as a very young person. I don't recommend this for anyone, but I think that some of us sometimes think about it. I left home and I wanted to be on my own, and it was too young, and I just sort of fled. And when I did, I found myself in a tremendous amount of problems and difficulty. with very little security, and actually found myself homeless and destitute and without any money. And I sort of had, I hate to say it, I had sort of estranged myself from my parents. It was a difficult time in my life, and a time that now I think back upon as a growth period for myself, because obviously I love both of them very much, and I only have fond memories of them, until so bad as an adult that I caused them as much pain as I did. But during that episode of me being homeless and doing things like selling my blood or plasma to survive, I became very empathetic and of those who don't have homes and are sometimes destitute. And so it's been a focus of my life along with music since I was a young man.
How old were you when you became homeless?
I was 17 years old. And, you know, some people were probably out on their own at 17, but at that point, I actually did not have a home. I was sleeping in fields, and I was staying under semi-truck beds and catch as catch can, and eating in rescue missions, and staying in, sleeping in those rescue missions at night. Rescue missions are places that feed the homeless and clothe them, and usually a rescue mission lets people in at, let's say, 5:30, and then releases them in the morning at about 5:30. And there are maybe 20 or 30 people in a barracks sort of place. And then, of course, I worked as a migrant worker too, picking peppers and all that sort of thing. And then finally worked in a dyeing shop during this period of my life. Love is what really changed everything around Lillian for me, because at one point I felt heart-stricken, and I contacted my parents and I said, "Would you take me back home?" And they did, unconditionally. And it still touches me today when I think about it, their love for me.
Wow, that's a growth period, such a difficult time. So can you tell my listeners where you were when this all happened? What state?
Yes, I was in Pompano Beach, Florida. I had been in Florida, and that's the state that this all transpired. It was quite an episode in my life, to say the least, and it taught me so many life lessons. And obviously, when I finally came back home, you know, I changed my life entirely. I started to be on a new direction, and I prayed for guidance, and then found a tremendous pathway. I finally ended up in New York City. I was living in the Midwest, actually, in a place called, well, everybody's heard about it, Wisconsin, and I was playing music. My mother finally wanted to go back to Wisconsin after having been with my father, and we moved from Kentucky to Wisconsin. We auctioned off the home place. Every single toy that I had, every item that I had was auctioned off by an auctioneer. Even my bicycle I saw being ridden off by a young boy whose father had purchased it for him. I had nothing. We got in the back of a Rambler car with a jar full of hard-boiled eggs and headed up to Wisconsin. That first winter I had no coat and got extremely sick with a thing called strep throat, and wound up in a hospital with a disease of the kidneys called nephritis. I had a really amazing struggle as a young man, but the great thing about it is that music sort of always helped me find a path along with God's grace and love of my parents and other people. And when I wound up in New York City, I started playing music in the clubs. I actually remember the day I left my parents for New York City. They actually warned me. They said, "Well, be safe," and got on a Greyhound bus. And this was about when I was 19 years old. I got on a Greyhound bus and went to New York City, hardly knowing anyone, with 2 cardboard boxes. And they actually wouldn't let me take my guitar. I had a great guitar. I had a Martin D28 that I had purchased, for $700, and they wouldn't let me take it because they thought I'd be stolen when I got to New York City. And lo and behold, I actually was robbed a few times when I was in New York City. But somebody gave me a guitar, and I started playing in the folk clubs in Greenwich Village. Greenwich Village, it wasn't the heyday of Greenwich Village. It was later Greenwich Village, the 1970s and 1980s Greenwich Village. But people like, have you ever heard of the Coen Brothers film Inside Llewellyn Davis? I believe that's how it's pronounced. Have you ever heard of that film, Lillian?
No, sir.
Well, it's a film about a folk singer. It's based on the story of this gentleman by the name of Dave Van Ronk, and he's passed away. But I knew Dave Van Ronk, and I knew a lot of the people in the Greenwich Village folk scene, from Tom Paley and the New Lost City Ramblers, a lot of people who played music. And I started playing in the folk scene and Greenwich Village folk scene as a bluegrass and an old-time picker and player. And the most amazing thing is I met this gentleman who had played with Woody Guthrie. Woody Guthrie is this very early American folk icon who wrote "This Land Is Your Land, This Land Is My Land." Have you ever heard that song?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, he wrote that, Woody Guthrie. Tom Paley used to play with Woody Guthrie, and then Tom Paley and I became a trio with my buddy Bill Christopherson called the Mysterious Redbirds. And now we recorded for an album's worth of material, and that was the first time that I got on a national record label. I got on this record label out of Roanoke, Virginia, called Copper Creek Records. And after that, I became sort of another vagabond, Lillian, because I traveled from town to town and played all across the United States and music, and still do. And this year celebrates my 24th year of being the leader of the band James Reams and the Barnstormers. And I hope you get a chance to play some of my music for the listeners. I really appreciate that.
Yes. Wow, it does show that music can help heal. And so now you're involved in a program to help homeless people called Circle the City. Can you tell my listeners about it?
Yeah, I'd love to. By the way, what you hit it right on the head, Lillian. You're so insightful. Yes, music can heal. But sometimes people become ill, and it's hard. I mean, music can heal the soul, absolutely, but music can't heal when somebody has a broken leg. And sometimes Circle the City is a nonprofit organization that has health services to men, women, and children facing homelessness, and it was incorporated in 2008. And it's actually was created by this wonderful Sister Adele O'Sullivan, who was a doctor. And what she did is she had a shoebox, and the shoebox, they'd throw some dollars and small change in there for helping those who were homeless after they got out of the hospital. And that shoebox, it's like a miracle, Lillian. It never came empty. And people still contribute to it. And it really helps those who sometimes come out of the hospital and have no place to live or have lost their home while they're in the hospital. And it's helped more than 650 homeless men and women recover from illnesses and injuries. And 80% of those who are now no longer on the streets or the emergency shelter system.
That's fantastic. So how are you involved in this program?
Well, I'm actually, my new album is, I'm having a new album come out called Rhyme in Season. And Rhyme in Season, actually, most of the songs are based on those who are on that journey. People that have been homeless, or those who are, because of their lifestyle, seem to be homeless, like truck drivers. They rarely get home. And part of the proceeds of the album are going to Circle the City, but also I volunteer for Circle the City, and I'm giving Circle the City money. And anybody, any of your listeners, if they want to contact Circle the City themselves to give money, all they have to do is go to info@circlethecity.org or 602-776-9000. It's an amazing organization, and of course, It needs help. It has volunteer opportunities and donations, and it's just an amazing place for those who sometimes need a time and place to heal.
Can you give me the phone number one more time?
Sure. The phone number is 602-776-9000.
Okay. Thank you. How can kids my age help support those involved with Circle the City or those in poverty?
Well, Toys for Tots is a good place to start, I really think. I think that, it may seem, it's a basic, but I think that, emphasizing the holidays and giving toys to for Tots is a great way to begin. And sometimes they'll take, because, I think that, and Lily, and maybe you'll agree with me, sometimes we get so many things. We're in such an amazing country that allows us to have so many different things. Sometimes sharing some of those things with those that are less fortunate are a good way to go. And so that's what I would do. And then volunteering at churches. And then also, maybe asking your teacher for a holiday project. How could we help the homeless, or how could we help the less fortunate? And think of it as a class project, because, there's so many ways that we can help it. Because I think, and this is my hope, poverty doesn't always have to be with us. We can eliminate extreme poverty with all of the amazing things that we have in this world, from computers to telecommunications to solar energy. We can elevate more and more people out of poverty by actually discussing some of the remedies that we have with it, like Circle the City or Toys for Tots. Well, there's actually other organizations that do the same sort of thing. It's an amazing world that we live in, and it's a world of possibility, and it's a world of change that we can all make a difference. And so I feel lucky to be part of it, and feel lucky to have that sort of thing in my life to give me just more feelings about life. Not that I didn't have it before, but it just allows me to feel good about helping others. And I'm sure you feel the same way, Lillian. And I know that you're a part of the church organization, and that you are probably active in it because your father is a minister, and I'm sure that they have many organizations that reach out to those in need.
Those are all great ideas for kids my age. What have you learned about persevering through hardships through your life?
Well, that's a great question. And yes, I feel that it's so important to live in the now, not think about the future. When you live in the now, those things that are immediately your barriers and your boundaries, you have to make decisions, and sometimes those are decisions that are from the heart, and sometimes those are decisions that are informed by other information. But just live in the moment, choose the best direction every single moment, and don't beat yourself up whenever things aren't going well for yourself. Just be in the game and keep putting one foot in front of the other.
My podcast is called I Had to Ask. What question do you wish people would ask you when you're in interviews?
Well, I would like them to ask me about, I would like them to ask me about what ways that we can change the world. I think that people are too concerned about personality and celebrity, and I think that sometimes the most important thing is our community. And so, you've asked the important questions about how music can heal, music can bring together community, and music can raise awareness for some of the major issues that we have in our life today. And that's sort of what I want to do with my life. I want to be part of the community. I want to be self-expressed, and I want to raise awareness so that people become aware of the issues that are plaguing our society, and you unite and come to a common organization about this. Music has changed the world. The civil rights movement was with Martin Luther King was fueled by gospel music, and the Vietnam War was changed by folk music, and all types of music sort of bring awareness on a universal level. I always think of the beautiful song that John Lennon wrote about imagine the world all together, living as one and living in peace. And wouldn't that be a great thing to aspire to?
It would. If you could go back in time and give a younger you advice, what would you say?
Well, I would say, and I know that this sounds like old-fashioned information because I wasn't a very good child at all. In fact, I probably caused my parents many sleepless nights. But, I would say learn from your parents, listen to what they have to say, listen to people around you that have reached positions like a minister or a teacher. Listen to them. Don't accept everything that they say, but listen to them and try to then sort out what you think is the truth and do your own research to find out the best way to live your own life. And then live your own life with the passion that you really deserve, because guess what? This is it. And it's just an amazing life to have and behold if we live in the moment and we live every single moment to the fullest.
I appreciate that answer about living now and imagining peace. And you're very impressive. Before we sign off, can you tell my listeners a little bit about your music and your success?
Well, sure, Lillian. I've recorded 8 albums, and one was nominated as Recorded Event of the Year. And each of the albums I'm so proud of. They were just labors of love. I've appeared on other people's albums. I appeared at venues all across the United States, places like Lincoln Center, festivals, Gray Fox, most of the major festivals. And I've also been able to play with some legendary musicians, people like Walter Hensley, who was a legend in Baltimore, people like Tom Haley, who worked with Woody Guthrie and was the founder of the New Lost City Ramblers, and other musicians. And my biggest success is just to be able to have music in my lives. I think that sometimes we prize too much on awards and accolades, and actually the real joy of music is performing it and having it part of your life, whether you're a listener, whether you write the music, or whether you make the music. And so I just feel lucky that I can be in my passion and create music for my livelihood now.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell my listeners?
Well, Lillian, I would like to tell them that don't be upset if you can't find your passion immediately, because finding your passion is a search. Look, for me, I looked at some of the worst paid places a young person could look for his passion, and I saw some of the most devastating sights of anybody. But if you keep true to your vision, and if you keep trying to find out what you're really interested in, you'll find it. Don't think it has to appear today or tomorrow. Sometimes it takes time, and guess what? The journey is worth it, and the prize is the greatest to have in the whole world, to be fully self-expressed in your world and to be a part of it and to be part of the community of mankind.
Thanks for being on the show, and thank you so much for talking to me.
Well, thank you, Lillian. You know what? Anytime. It was great to meet you, too, you and your wonderful mother down at the International Bluegrass Music Association. And I just have to tell you, what you do is amazing. And just keep up. All right, and thank you. It's a pleasure to be able to